All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Wellness Cafe. Today we have Rachael Kable, the host of the Mindful Kind on. Hey, Rachel, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for taking your time to come on.
You're very welcome. I'm really excited to be here and to say hello to all of your community. Hey, guys.
So, I have a little bit of background of you because I listen to your podcast pretty much on a regular basis in my commute, and I learn a ton from you. And for our listeners out there who don't know who Rachael Kable is, would you tell them a little bit about yourself and your story?
Yeah, sure. So I started with a background in stress as probably the first kind of reason that I went into mindfulness. So from a very young age, early teens, started to really feel more and more stressed, and that kind of built up over my teenage years, and especially at high school, getting into year 11, year 12, it was very confronting for me. I ended up having to go to the doctor with tension headaches, and they realized I had high blood pressure and said that basically I needed to get my stress under control. So that was kind of the first experience that I realized, I need to learn to find a way to manage my own stress. So after that, I think I was just really curious about psychology and the mind and how it all worked together. So I actually went to uni and I studied a Bachelor of Psychological Science. And after that, went and did a graduate certificate of coaching and counseling, because I realized that I loved all of that stuff. I loved learning more about my own mind, and I loved sharing kind of my journey with other people, and I loved talking about stress and talking about, sleep disorders, and talking about just everything, anxiety disorders, OCD. And I just found it really, really interesting, both in terms of, how many people are out there and all the differences that we can have between us, but also relating it to my experiences and where I was at and what could I learn that would help improve my own life. So I actually first really started diving into mindfulness when I was volunteering on a helpline at the Anxiety Recovery Centre for Victoria. And they trained us quite comprehensively. So I learned a couple of different stress management techniques. I learned all about the anxiety disorders. But the thing that really resonated with me was the mindfulness strategies. And we were taught this very simple technique of sitting down and bringing your attention to 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things that you can taste. So we might have like a cup of tea and then a piece of chocolate, and 2 things that you can feel. And it's just going through all the different senses and being able to actually take the information that's coming in through your senses, which we do have access to, pretty much all of the time, really. And being able to use those senses and that information to anchor ourselves into the present moment. So that was really my first kind of experience of what mindfulness could be like. And I was like, whoa, because I spent so much time not being present that all of a sudden I kind of realized that, this is what it feels like to be here now, to not be thinking a couple of steps ahead, or to be thinking about something that I said that I shouldn't have said, or, it was the first time that I wasn't really caught up in either the future or the past. I was just simply here. So for me, that was quite a powerful experience, and I didn't know how powerful until I started doing more and more of it. I started to really notice a lot of benefits in my own life. My relationships grew stronger because I was more present and I was connecting deeper with those people. I started sleeping so much better. I used to lie in bed for ages and not be able to fall asleep because I was always planning. I was always thinking, even with something like this interview, for example, if I wasn't practicing mindfulness last night, I would have been planning everything that I would have wanted to say and trying to predict the questions and trying to think about my answers. And, it's not it's a stressful way to be living when you're doing that all the time. And it does impact on lots of different areas of your life, whether it is sleep or your relationships or your work or, self-care and just the nice things that you do for yourself. So that's kind of how I fell into this whole field and area. And yeah, about a year ago, I launched my business, and I have been learning constantly since then, both in mindfulness and just across my life in general. There's lots of things that come up when you become an entrepreneur, and you meet a lot of different people and you just grow as a person. So that's what I love to share.
That's awesome. What's your business about?
So I'm a mindfulness mentor and I have my podcast, The Mindful Kind. I have done all kinds of things over the last year. I've hosted in-person workshops and I've written and published ebooks. I've spoken at other people's events. I've done coaching services. It's been a bit of everything, really, but next year is the year of simplifying. So I've had a good look at everything that I really enjoy doing and the things that I don't so much enjoy doing, and I've chosen what I'm going to actually bring into the new year and really focus on in 2017.
Absolutely. I think that's brilliant to just focus on what you enjoy doing after, otherwise you can be spreading yourself thin and not getting to where you want as efficient or as fast as possible.
Mm.
Now, yeah, that's powerful because we do live in a busy lives, right? We all living busy lives. We got errands to do, we got families, we got commitments, we have work. So all that builds up. And a lot of
Mm.
time, the first thing that drops out of the picture is ourself. That's what I find with me and my patients, people around me as well. Those seems to be that one thing that seems to be missing, or as at least I'm sorry. The thing that drops out first is self-care,
Mm.
and people may not realize this, but overthinking is so destructive on so many levels, right? Like you said, you would be laying in bed at night thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow, or thinking about what happened already in the past. Meanwhile, at that particular time, you should be resting and sleeping and getting your recovery for your body so you can perform better the next day or actually live. And stress adds up. Mentally, we cannot differentiate the stress, the real stress, which is a tiger chasing you, or a tiger named paperwork or project or whatever that may be, right? The body actually elicits the same stress response, which is elevated cortisol, and it just wreak havoc on your body. And like you said, you notice yourself start to sleep better, probably feel better too, right?
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Well, when you have that layer of, bad sleep taken away from you, you feel like a different person, and there are lots of actual changes in your body. You can process things faster and your memory improves, and just all these little things that start to add up and really make a difference in your day-to-day life. If you've had enough sleep the night before and your memory is, at its prime, then if you're coming home from work at the end of the day and you remember, oh, I've got to go to the shops and get milk and, the groceries for dinner, that means that you get home and you've got those things, rather than if you drove all the way home because, you're tired and distracted and you're not really in that place of focus. And then you get home and you realize, oh, I've forgotten those things. And then maybe your partner's like, oh, why did you forget those things? We really needed those things. And then there's a fight. All these little things add up and they just kind of bounce off each other and influence different parts of your life. So, yeah, being able to use mindfulness in all these different aspects is something I've found to be really empowering.
Yeah, now that you said that, one thing that I pulled out from your podcast is journaling. You are pretty heavy on that. Basically, just mind dumping whatever's going on in your head that is what I call an unfinished or incomplete loop. So you just write it all out, or maybe summarize a day. And then that way you have a little bit of a sense of completion to the day, so that you can go on and just rest and know that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, definitely. There are so many ways that I've practiced journaling, not just over this last year, but I'm quite an introvert. So all of my younger years, I spent a lot of time reading and writing, and I kept a lot of journals. I I think from about the age of 11, I kept my first journal and I filled that up within a year and then just kind of kept going and lost touch with it when study was starting to get a bit heavier in my later years of school, but picked it up again once I moved out of home. And yeah, it's a practice that I find to be really, really useful for me. So I've tried lots of different journals. And lots of different techniques. I used to journal just by writing down what happened in my day. And, back when I was 13, it was, I fell in love with this boy and, he's so cute and all this sort of stuff. And it wasn't really specific. At the moment, I really try to journal in ways that help me to improve my mindfulness practice, or they do help me to relieve stress. It's a very organic process too, though. At the end of the day, at the moment, my favorite practice is that I've got this new notebook and I've been writing down just my favorite memories from the day. And it's been a really beautiful thing to do because I can look back over this journal now and, I'm about 20 pages in or so it's still pretty new. But being able to look back over these memories that I really valued on that day and realizing that, I actually have already forgotten about that happy memory. And it's really, for me, it balances out that negativity bias. In your mind, you tend to focus on the negative aspects of your life more often than not. And sometimes it is harder to remember those positive things. And so I've been kind of experimenting with that and really enjoying it. Not only do I have this kind of beautiful keepsake of wonderful things that have happened to me, but it puts me in a positive frame of mind before I fall asleep at night. And again, that kind of, I don't know, just makes me feel a bit better and I fall asleep a bit easier. But there's lots of different ways.
Certainly, and you just hit on a good point where you said that you note down the positive events that happen. I think that's huge because otherwise we just forget it. Like if you if it could be just an exchange smile at the grocery store that you actually at that moment you connect with the other person, they acknowledge you, they smile back, and it's beautiful, right? But those may not mean a lot, but it's a moment of connection that if you just if you don't acknowledge it, it's gone forever in the vault of the memory bank that never going to be open again. And I think life is all about just connecting moments, right? That's all we really have is the now, and we can go down the rabbit hole on that one, but let's just keep it pretty simple on this one.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, definitely. It is easy to forget those little moments, but I found also that the more that I've been trying to write them down at the end of the day, the more I actually pay attention, during the day, because I'm looking out for these little instances, or I'm deliberately going out of my way to make a positive memory. Like you said, it might be as simple as a smile with someone. And actually yesterday when I was at work, I smiled to my barista and I said, "Thank you so much. This is great coffee." I went out of my way to foster that connection, which I normally wouldn't do, not because, I'm not a nice person, but just because I am introverted. And for me, it's easier to just, take my coffee and say a quiet thank you and just, leave. So it's really nice to feel like I'm encouraging myself to create these little moments in my day. And, even something like, my partner is really tired and doesn't feel like doing the dishes, and so I offer. And then I'm like, okay, that felt really nice for me to offer just to do the dishes. And then I can write that down. So yeah, they don't have to be big or grand kind of gestures. They can just be little things that you notice and that you can interpret in a positive way or a meaningful way.
Absolutely. And those moments are shared moment. That barista may remember you, right? For that. That's because it stands out compared to the other mumble thing. Thank you, thanks. Looking down to your texting. Thanks, man. You know what I mean? Like, I know that because I've done that. I'd be texting, taking my coffee, and just left without even acknowledging the guy that was deliberately making this nice cup of cappuccino for me. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. You train your brain to start seeing positive things. So
Yeah.
Rachel, do you meditate?
Yes, I do. It is always changing. My meditation practice is very organic, I think I would call it. Sometimes I meditate while I'm practicing yoga. I do a lot of yin yoga, so stretching. My meditation there is to pay attention to how my body's feeling, to really sink into the experience of feeling all the muscles, feeling the tension dissipate from my shoulders and my neck, paying attention to, how my body feels is a really relaxing and kind of flowing meditation for me. There's lots of other ways that I do it as well. I use the Calm app to kind of guide me if I'm feeling really stressed and like I can't focus and my mind's kind of racing. I need that voice to really listen to help bring me into the moment. And then I think there's all the little moments of meditation in my day. For example, if I went down to the beach, I would sit there and I would just watch the waves come in, maybe for only 30 seconds or a minute, but I would really pay attention to the sound and to the way that it looks. And that for me is being present and meditating, on the sound and the look of those waves. So I like practicing meditation in ways that feel really good for me. It's not always strictly I get up and I sit down for 20 minutes and I empty my mind and that's my meditation practice. I try to incorporate meditation and mindfulness into my day as much as I can.
Great. So I have a few follow-up questions with those. And first one would be, how do you differentiate meditation and mindfulness? Seems like it's very similar and goes hand in hand.
Yeah, definitely. So mindfulness is a form of meditation. So bringing yourself into the moment and being non-judgmental, which is what mindfulness is all about, essentially, that is a form of meditation. There are lots of other meditations, for example, guided visualizations, where you're actually picturing something that's not necessarily happening right now. It might be climbing a mountain, and then when you reach the top of the mountain, you feel empowered and you feel strong, and that's still a meditation, but it's not necessarily mindfulness. Or another type of meditation is just emptying your thoughts and trying to be still, or using a chant. And it's still connecting with yourself in that moment, but not necessarily connecting with the things that are around you. So for me, that kind of differentiates meditation and mindfulness a little bit. But yeah, it is confusing because mindfulness is a form of meditation.
Got it. Yeah, and a lot of times I think when people think of meditation, they think of, oh, you sit down for an hour not doing anything, and that sounds dreadful. Right?
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be a formal sit-down meditation. It can just be walking. That's why I use is walking meditation, 20 minutes, just to focus on the steps and just be present and incorporate mindfulness within walking. And before, I used to make myself, right, listen to the tone of the language, make myself sit for an hour or 45 minutes. And it ended up being like a checklist that I looked at and I don't want to do, and then I do it and I check it off, and it wasn't working. It wasn't beneficial for me and my spirit and my stress level. I felt like I became more stressed when I see that I have to meditate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Like
Yeah.
it's become a thing on your to-do list that you need to make time for when
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily resonate with you. Yeah. And that's something that I figured out very quickly when I first started learning more about mindfulness and meditation. I would try and meditate and it just wouldn't click with me. And I'd try and I'd try. And it did start to become kind of stressful, And so I realized, oh, okay, maybe this strict formal meditation isn't actually for me. And that's when I really started trying to actually incorporate it into other areas of my life. And I found that so much more beneficial for me personally, because all of a sudden, rather than having just 20 minutes a day to sit down and be present and be conscious and be aware, I was trying to be conscious and present and aware, as much as I possibly could throughout my whole day. And that's where I found a lot of the benefits for me personally came from, because suddenly, I was trying to be present when I was having conversations with people, or I was trying to be present during the commute, and I was trying to be present as I was taking a mindful break while I was at work by having a glass of water or having something to eat or doing a stretch. So it started to really show up in ways in my life that I didn't expect it to. But that's where I really learned a lot of the things that I talk about. I really want to help people feel empowered to practice mindfulness as much as they can in really fun ways and in really meaningful ways, in ways that resonate with them. Because I've realized that you can kind of choose what you do and don't practice. If journaling isn't something that you enjoy, then you don't need to do it. Maybe you do enjoy going for a mindful walk instead, or going down to the beach and watching the waves come in, or listening to a meditation app, or even just little daily tasks like washing the dishes or brushing your teeth or making the bed. Maybe those are your little forms of meditation, all staggered throughout your day. There are so many different ways to practice that I really believe that we can find ways that suit us the best and stick with those.
Absolutely. So listeners, it doesn't have to be a formal 1 hour sitting down and meditate. You can just listen to the Mindful Kind podcast and learn more tricks and tips that Rachael provides. It can be, like I said, walking. It could be just being aware, and being mindful in conversations is critical, I think. And I want to share with you too, Rachael, and our listeners, since start podcasting, I have noticed that I am a horrible listener because in our daily lives, I would listen to reply instead of just listen, right, and let it sink in. I'm hearing stuff and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna say this, and at that moment, you're tuning the rest of the message out. So that's powerful.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you start planning and you do start predicting, what are they going to say next and what am I going to answer? And then, for me, again, being introverted, I normally think something through before I say it. I've been doing that less and less since I started practicing mindfulness. I'll think something and be like, oh, that's what I want to say, and I'll just say it. And like you said, in conversations, if someone says something to you and it, triggers a train of thought, being able to stop that train of thought and come back to the moment and just keep listening to this person when they're talking with you I think it's empowering for you, and it's empowering for the other person, because suddenly they feel really heard. So yeah, I think it is powerful too.
On your podcast, The Mindful Kind, you're talking about being in a safe place a lot. And I'm just curious, what do you mean by being safe? Is it safe from your thoughts or safe from other things? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, definitely. So there are lots of different ways, I guess, that you could interpret a safe place. But for me, it is somewhere that I feel like I can safely explore my thoughts, and I feel like I'm supported. So those are two things that are really important for me. And I think because I grew up on a farm, we had a huge garden and not a lot of people around, and it was really beautiful and quiet. It was really good for me to be able to have that time to reflect and to think and to get more in tune with myself. And that was where I felt really safe. I didn't feel like people would be coming up to me and trying to talk to me all the time and distract me or anything like that. So I felt really safe because I could just be by myself. I know sometimes extroverted people feel safer when they're around other people, and that just triggers that feeling of comfort and support in them. So I think a lot of people would feel safe when they would feel safer if they knew that there was somewhere that they could go, that they could actually tune into their thoughts, or they could practice meditation, or they could just be who they are. You know, sometimes it's nice to feel like you can go somewhere and just feel completely accepted for the person that you are. And I think that's a really powerful place to start practicing mindfulness from, because you don't need to plan and predict as much. You know, if you're feeling safe, then you can take that moment to breathe and say, oh, it's okay, I'm okay here, and then start tuning into the present moment. Rather than, you know, for me as an introvert, if I was on a train, for example, it's really hard for me to practice being mindful because I feel very conscious of everyone around me, and I feel not necessarily exposed, but kind of vulnerable, I guess. Yeah.
Got it. Because I do have a when I practice mindfulness, I get to that safe place as well, but mine's a little different. Mine would be I feel safe from the future and the past, right? Because ultimately nothing can affect you at all in this moment, right? All the thoughts are just an illusion. Even though if you have 10,000 things on your to-do list, you can only engage one at a time, and it's this one right now, and the other 9,999 gonna have to wait until you get done with this one, right? And then you move on to the next one. And I think I read a quote somewhere where peace is not feeling good when everything's good. Peace is feeling okay in the midst of chaos, when everything else is crumbling down and you know that you're going to be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, like I did used to feel that vulnerable feeling when I was on public transport, but now that I've been practicing mindfulness for as long as I have, you know, I am starting to realize, oh, okay, that was just my interpretation of the situation, that I felt like people were looking at me or people were saying things about me. All of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's just what I think. You know, those are just my thoughts. That's not necessarily true. And all of a sudden this kind of threatening situation, which used to make me feel quite uncomfortable, suddenly isn't what I thought it was. So being able to practice mindfulness in this safe space and get comfortable with the feeling of it and get comfortable with your thoughts and understanding that they are just thoughts, and then being able to take that practice to other places, right, is something that's really good to try out and see how it feels.
Right. So being aware of your thoughts, and you kind of create that second layer, right, which is the observer, the person who's looking at, oh, I'm thinking. Once you're aware of that, you realize that you're not your thoughts, and then those thoughts can be examined as well, whether or not it's true.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of time it's not. It's just self-sabotaging a lot of times.
Yeah, definitely. That's been something, again, that's been really powerful for me in my own mindfulness journey, is realizing that, oh, I'm thinking a lot of things that aren't necessarily true. You know, I used to be thinking, for example, about public speaking, that I couldn't do public speaking and I wasn't a good talker and all I could really do was listen. And I never wanted to be, you know, talking in front of people, even in small groups. I got kind of nervous. And then this year doing workshops and speaking at events and things like that, I really had to look at those thoughts and tell those thoughts, you know, you're not true. And, you know, even if it was true, I could change it. So, for example, if I was thinking something like, oh, Rach, you can't do public speaking because you're not good at it, you know, that was true. I wasn't very good at public speaking. But then I realized that I don't need to keep telling myself that. I can tell myself, you know, I'm not very good right now, but I can practice and I'll get better. So being able to, understand those thoughts and kind of maybe even the basis for them, you know, I know that I was having that thought because I didn't grow up around a lot of people, and I'd had a couple of bad experiences with public speaking when I was younger, and all of a sudden that thought has become my belief over the years.
Right. You just hit on a very important point. I'm not good right now. Adding right now, meaning it's not permanent. Like I'm sad right now, and that's okay. I
Mm.
think I'm gonna have to start using that. That's a good one.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it just brings that kind of awareness to, yeah, this is the moment right now, but it will pass and it will change. And even with being happy, I hear a lot of people say that they
Mm.
want to practice mindfulness and meditation so they can feel happy all the time.
Mm.
But it's not about that. It's being able to experience maybe times of sadness or times of challenge, which is bound to happen at some point in your life, and still being okay and non-judgmental towards that. For example, if a friendship breaks down, you are probably going to be quite sad about that, and that's normal because you're grieving for the loss of this person in your life. So to be telling yourself in that situation, oh, I don't want to be mindful right now because I'm not happy and I need to wait until I'm happy before I can be mindful again. You don't need to do that. You can experience the present moment even if it's not positive. We have a tendency to label things as good or bad, and we try to have more of the good stuff and less of the bad stuff, but really we need that balance, and there's a lot of power that comes from being able to experience both of those situations and know that both of them will come and will go, and then will come and will go again.
Yeah, even the happy moments as well. They do go.
Yeah, exactly. And that used to be something that really stressed me out. When I was younger, I didn't feel happy an awful lot of the time. A lot of the time I was worried or I was stressed or I was judgmental and critical of myself. So I didn't feel completely happy a lot of the time. But when I did, almost straight away, I felt nervous again because I was like, oh, I feel really happy right now. Oh no, when is this going to end? Or how can I make this last? And all of a sudden it's gone. And
Right.
yeah.
You feel like you have this doomsday prophet just whispering in your ear, this is not gonna last long.
Yeah, exactly. And then it doesn't feel happy anymore anyway. So being just able to experience these things, as they come up and as they leave, it's all okay, and I think it's all natural. And so many people talk about or seem to feel this pressure of having to be happy all the time, and I think social media does play quite a large role in that as well. We're exposed to these people that on the outside seem to have perfect lives when there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. I know even for me, I tend to share the things in my life that are good, but it doesn't mean that I'm not having a bad day. Something might be going on in the background that's completely different that I didn't talk about at all. And I think everyone probably does that.
It's all stage because
Yeah.
we post pictures and events when we're happy, right? Like, oh, engaged, oh, new baby, oh, traveling, and we can kind of get trapped into thinking, oh, everybody else is happy. What's wrong with me? I am sad, right? Like that is a trap, I think, and I think it's organic too. Like it's not like we deliberately built an infrastructure to make people think that um, everybody else is happy, but that's just natural. I think we have to be aware of that. That we're not alone.
Yeah, definitely. And also, if you do see something and it makes you feel jealous or angry or upset or anything, that's okay too. If I saw a friend of mine going on a beautiful tropical holiday and I was like, oh, I'm so jealous, like I would love to be doing that right now. That's okay to be feeling that, that's all right. It's we again we put so much pressure on ourselves to be perfect and to feel all these positive things when maybe sometimes we don't, and that's okay. And sometimes those feelings are signaling something else. If I'm feeling jealous of someone going on a tropical holiday, I can be asking myself, well, why am I feeling that way? And it's like, oh, because I really want to go on a tropical holiday. So then I can start kind of taking these little steps. Like maybe I'll be like, oh, okay, maybe I just need a bit of a break and I'll take a day off work and, go for a drive out to the beach and relax for a bit. And then I feel like I'm in a much better state of mind.
Certainly. Would you share with our listeners who may have heard of mindfulness before but hasn't really dipped a toe in, but hasn't really go into the pool yet and really practice because maybe it's a lack of understanding or the need to be perfect. How would you recommend such person to start on his or her mindful journey?
Well, that's a great question. So, first of all, I think understanding what mindfulness is really important. So, for me, I practiced it a lot and I tried it out in different ways. And I read a lot of books and I read a lot of articles. And I kind of came to I don't know, my own understanding of what mindfulness is and how it felt for me. And I think it can feel different for everybody. So, it's kind of important to explore that, to explore what it feels like to be in the moment and to let your thoughts be, or to, maybe there's a particular thought that's been coming up a lot for you and you haven't really let yourself explore that because you feel like it's bad or something. To be able to be like, oh, okay, I can explore this, I can understand this thought and I can understand that it's not necessarily true. So being able to just have a bit of a play with your mindfulness practice, to not feel like it has to look like someone else's. I've found that people really resonate with different practices. I do 3 different breathing practices at my in-person workshops, and then after it's over, I ask everyone which resonated with them the most, which helped them be in the moment the most, and which one felt the easiest for them to do. And every time that I've done that, there's been a spread of people. Some have preferred the first one, some have preferred the second one, and some have preferred the third one. Every time. Everyone experiences mindfulness in different ways, and it resonates again, differently with everybody depending on your childhood and your experience and who you are as a person and your personality. So being able to start off your mindfulness journey with an open mind, I think, is something that's really important. Knowing that it might take you somewhere that you don't necessarily expect, or being able to try practices which you're not sure if they'll resonate with you, but being okay with the outcome. Maybe it doesn't resonate with you and that's okay, and maybe it does, and then you can incorporate it more and more. Maybe it doesn't resonate with you but you really like the idea of it, so you practice it more. So I think being able to, firstly, educate yourself. Secondly, have an open mind. Thirdly, explore your mindfulness practice. And 4, just keep going. I hear from a lot of people who get frustrated or feel like they're not good at being mindful. And I think that those people tend to put a lot of pressure on themselves and to feel that judgment of, oh, I'm not good at being mindful right now, and my mind keeps wandering and I have to keep bringing it back. And I'm like, yeah, but that's great. Like, if you are noticing that your mind is wandering and you're bringing it back, you're practicing being mindful. You are strengthening that mindfulness muscle more and more. So every time that you do notice that your mind has wandered, and my mind still wanders too, if I'm doing a meditation, I'll start thinking about something and I'll be like, oh, my mind's run away again, I'll bring it back. That's okay.
Yeah, and those are great points. Just being okay with whatever comes, as well as the outcome, whatever you start to feel, and be okay with that. And I think you hit it right on the head, which is when you start realizing that you have to bring yourself back. That's the first step, is being aware of the thought. You start to seeing that second layer now, and then to be doing more and more of that, you start to flex the mindfulness muscles, which is, I like how you put it, because I think people overlook meditation or the practice of mindfulness because you may not see the grand results right away.
Yeah.
But in a moment of crises where things are just upside down, your whole reality change, whether it's a big loss or getting fired or breakup, then the mindful muscles come into play, like really, really help you through tough times, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there was a point about a year ago where my dad had been in an accident, in a truck accident, and I got the call about it, and they didn't know where he'd gone, which hospital he'd gone to, or where he'd ended up, and there was nothing I could do at that point in time. I had to kind of wait for another phone call to find out where he was and how he was, and literally all I knew was that he'd been in an accident and he'd been taken to hospital. So I live about 4 hours away from my home, and I freaked out, obviously. I started panicking and like, oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to go out and should I start driving? And what should I do? And who should I call? And just really panicking. And in that moment, I was crying as well. I was like, I need to calm down. Like I really noticed I'm very in tune with how my body reacts now. And I'm like, I need to calm down. And so I literally just put my head in my hands and just started taking these really, really deep breaths. And it was hard because I was crying and it was really shaky. And just taking these deep breaths in and out. And I think I did that for about 10 minutes. And then after that, I felt like I was in a much safer place to cope with the situation. I all of a sudden I didn't want to rush out to my car and start driving like a maniac to I didn't even know where I was going. I was able to kind of calmly sit there and wait for a call and find out what the next step was rather than freaking out. And that was a really powerful experience for me to have. And it kind of solidified this idea that, well, mindfulness is actually really powerful. Like to be able to have such a scary thing happening in that moment, be able to sit there and, be listening and be tuning in with my breath so that I can get to a calmer place and feel like I can cope with this situation. For me, that was something that really, I don't know, made me feel like I was a stronger person. And yeah, then I found out I got a call about another 20 minutes later about where he was. And then I was able to go out to my car and calmly drive there and go and see him. And he was a bit banged up, but he was okay. He got out of hospital a couple of days later. So it was really, it really stood out to me how I coped with that situation and how differently it was from before I was practicing mindfulness to after I was practicing, and the headspace that I was in. And, I wasn't thinking the worst outcomes anymore and predicting that the worst had happened. Instead, I was telling myself it was going to be okay and that I was okay, and that we'd just take it one step at a time.
That's a great lesson, and also a great reassurance for you too that you're on the right path of self-empowering, really, with mindfulness and being able to apply it when needed the most, not just in the yoga studio, not in just the grocery store. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, it definitely was. And like it does make a difference in my day-to-day life, but having something like that happen and feeling like, even though it was horrible and I was really scared, that I was able to stay in a place that I felt like it was going to be okay. It was a powerful experience for me.
Awesome. I think we can just go on and on and on, but I'm going to start to have to wrap this thing up here.
Yeah, no worries.
So, what are some of your resources that you go to when it comes to learning more about mindfulness and applying practicality of mindfulness? Because you do teach, you do podcasting, but where do you go to when you actually need more, I guess, tools or tips in your arsenals?
I read a lot of self-development books. So The Power of Now, I loved that one. Yeah, The Happiness Trap is another really good one that kind of started to really kick off my journey with understanding my own thoughts. I have a lot of psychology books from when I studied, but they're not so much useful. I think it was just the little bits in there that I kind of go back to now and again. Mindful.org is a really good website. I don't know, basically there's so much information at our fingertips that we can just reach out and grab it whenever we like. If I'm feeling a bit like, I really want to understand mindful eating a bit more, I can go on Amazon and there's, thousands of books about mindfulness and eating. So I can just order one and I can learn a bit more about that. And I guess just exploring with my own mindfulness practice in my own life, seeing where it does kind of fit and where it doesn't fit. For example, goal setting is kind of a weird one because you can be mindful in the moment and like how you feel about a goal, but goal setting in itself is, predicting and planning for the future. So it's not necessarily a mindfulness practice, but being able to apply it in situations like that where I didn't think that it would resonate, being able to be open to where my mindfulness practice will take me and what I have to learn, and knowing that I don't know all the answers, and knowing that I can be learning probably every day for the rest of my life is something that really excites me.
Awesome. Eckhart Tolle is great. His book is game changer. The Power Now, New Earth.
Yeah.
Those are just powerful books. So how can people reach you and learn more about you besides listening to the Mindful Kind podcast on iTunes and many other apps? Where are you online?
So my website is at www.rachaelkable.com, and I'm on Facebook again at Rachael Kable, and Instagram and Pinterest. I do love hanging out on social media. So yeah, I'm adding new mindfulness resources to my website all the time as well. I have a members section, so it's free to join. You just pop in your email address and then you get all the resources that I've been creating over the last year or so. I blog a lot on my website, so there's lots of articles about mindfulness, and all my podcast episodes are there as well.
Awesome. Now, the last question. The name of the show is called The Wellness Cafe.
Mm-hmm.
What does wellness mean to Rachael Kable?
I think for me it means choice. It means being able for me to say, yes, I want to practice yoga, but no, I don't want to go for a run, and that feels good. Or, yes, I want to have a glass of water instead of a glass of alcohol. Being able to choose what you do and don't want in your life, or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you want to go for a run and you don't want to practice yoga, or maybe you want a glass of alcohol and not a glass of water. Everybody is different, and those are my personal choices, and the person next to me might choose something different. Being able to, I think, listen to your own body and what your needs are is really important. So, like I said, I love yoga and I don't drink alcohol because that's what feels good for my body. I have 1 cup of coffee a day and that's enough for me. Being able to understand what you do and don't want and make choices based on that, based on what you believe in, what your values are, what feels good for you, that's really important as part of wellness, and being able to understand that wellness covers lots of different aspects of your life. Nutrition and sleep and self-care and exercise and everything. There's so many different aspects of it. So I think it's great that you've got this podcast to kind of dive into those different aspects and empower people to make their own wellness choices.
Thank you so much for coming on today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.